Welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses, where we talk about navigating the labyrinth of the mind and emerging victorious, which is not always easy for me to say. But my guest today is the wonderful Natalie McMillan, if I want to give her Sunday name. And it's really easy to get caught up in the titles that somebody has and the things that they do, whether that's HR and OD, professional, mum, wife, chair, non-exec director. And I genuinely could go on listing all of the things that Nat has done. But she's so much more than that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite her onto the podcast, because there is so much more. And one of the many things that I do really love about being in Nat's company is her direct style and her no nonsense approach to conversations, regardless of who she's talking to, and the ability to do that in a way that is resourceful to all involved in the conversation. So that's why I wanted to share you with my audience and invite you onto the podcast. So welcome, Nat.
Well, thank you. What an introduction. And I'm delighted to be here. And I'm sure I will be my usual direct, forthright, no nonsense self.
Absolutely. See, straight away calling it out. So the first question is always, can you tell us about a time where you came to your senses and where and what that led you to?
Yeah, I mean, I did, I had to think about this, Jules, because there are probably a number of examples I could use. I'm sure, like many of us, those moments of, as you said, coming to your senses, or I would call it just a moment of clarity, of almost, what are you doing, Natalie? What on earth? Step away and come on. So the example I'm going to share, and in true Nat style, I'm going to share a very personal story. I truly believe, and you will know this in conversations with me, I truly believe that leadership, inspiring other people, comes from being vulnerable and being honest about things, experiences that we've had. So we talk
Yeah.
about them as stories. I think it's just being honest about some of the bumps in the road and the things that have happened to us, because they happen to everybody. I know that in my career, I work with lots of different levels of people, have been very privileged to do that. And I do know um, that everybody hits bumps, regardless of what we think we see on social media or not. And I think it's really important. You kind of listed some of the job roles I've had. I think it's really important that people also see that I'm actually ordinary at the same time as having some extraordinary qualities. So that's why I've chosen to share a very personal story. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, of course, Jules. So the story I'm going to share is when I was a chief executive. And actually, it largely led to me making a big decision in my life. One of the factors that led to me stepping away from those employed roles and setting up my own business. So a big moment in life, and one that I certainly don't have any regrets about. If I start it in short, and I'm sure you'll ask me some questions about it and we'll explore it further, but it was a real moment of, I was going through a particularly difficult time at work with a particular individual, I would say a very toxic individual who, for whatever reason, had a real dislike for me and obviously really wanted to bring me down in whatever way. So I won't go into all the ins and outs of the HR process, but by and large, anyway, started an entire campaign about me being a bully and grievances and whipping up other people in her department. And the moment of coming to my senses is not that you can stop those things happening or managing other people. But I remembered working previously with a coach, and it's something that I often ask myself or will ask others. And it was that moment, if you call it coming to your senses, but I call it a moment of real lens like clarity for me, in a real wave of emotion, injustice, all of those things that I was feeling in that moment, quite out of control about it. Kind of gone into that victim mode, right? Life's so unfair. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, why are you bothered about this lady's opinion of you? does it matter? And it sounds so simple, doesn't it? And it was that that made me go, no, I don't rate her. I don't rate who she is. I don't think she has any integrity. So why would I be bothered about her view of me as an individual? And I realized I wasn't. And the way the confidence, the inner strength, as I call it, because I just kind of dismissed it, which sounds really brutal, doesn't it? But it's the reality of, yeah, I'm not bothered. I didn't value her opinion as a colleague. I didn't respect her as a colleague. I didn't think she was very good at a job. So why would it bother me that she's doing a campaign against me and saying all this about me? And I just wasn't bothered. I didn't value her opinion. And therefore, right. And it was literally like that. It was just a moment that made me go, yeah, okay. And I've kept that in my life since that moment. I mean, that is about 8 years ago now.
That's so powerful.
Hmm. And it's the thing, where people a lot of the time will ask, where do you get your confidence from? And I don't think it's confidence for me. It's self-assurance about knowing who I am, and I'm okay that not everybody likes me. So when I run a number of my national programs for people who are aspiring to work around board tables, I will start very early on with saying to them, I've got some breaking news that you need to accept right from day one, which is everybody doesn't like you.
And how does that go down?
Usually a little bit like that. Well, there's some laughter. Some people usually look a little surprised, if I'm honest. But it is an impossible dream to think that
Mm.
everybody is going to like you, connect with you. I mean, it's just not how life goes, does it? That's why we all have different connections. We have different friendship groups. It's the same at work, people that you will work with, and I don't mean be the same when I say hit it off with them, but just some people that you will naturally think, God, this team's worked really well together, and other people that you think, yeah, I'm not really getting them. I don't like everybody.
If you've listened to the first episode of Coming to Your Senses, you'll know that in the early 2000s, I experienced a breakdown. I tried different therapies, but it was coaching that truly helped me transform my life. Initially, when I discovered coaching, though, I couldn't afford it. And it was a kind soul who sponsored me not only to have coaching, but also to train and become a coach. And my promise to them was that I would pay it forward. And I've done that in many ways over the years, initially through social media and private Facebook group called Confidence Revolution, and also through Coming to Your Senses, the podcast. But it triggered for me a passion to really want to make and create a secure, supportive space for people to be able to come together and have conversations that transform their lives. So I created the Conscious Conversations community. It's a group where we meet on more than once a month, and we have a focused theme which is guided by the community and facilitated by me. There's hundreds of hours of learning and resources and materials to help you transform your life in a like-minded space. Because I get passionate about it and because this was my promise to pay it forward, I'm offering you the opportunity to trial it for £1 for the first month. If that appeals to you, then head to juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer. juleswyman.online/conscious conversations offer to explore what's available for you through being part of a conscious community. But I think that's the point. And funnily enough, I will often ask that with clients when they will talk about, oh yeah, but I want them to like me and blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, yeah, but do you like everybody? And that is that shocker when people go, well, no. And it's like, well, then other people are not going to like you. They're not going to like what you stand for, how you stand for it, your value system, your way of doing things. There may be little bits that they don't like. There may be the whole package. But I think the power of recognizing that as you're describing, and also recognizing there was a phrase that you used that I think is so important, which is that person who started the campaign about you her opinions were her opinions. They're not fact. They're opinions. And I think the more that I think very often we think when someone tells us something about us, doesn't matter whether we look at it through the lens of good, bad, right, wrong, we perceive it as fact rather than acknowledging that it is an opinion.
I agree. I agree. It is an opinion. I remember having conversations with my chair kind of after that, and me and her saying, she just doesn't like me. Yeah. And I don't know why. And I'm not going to invest my time, my emotion in working that out. That's how it is. She's also completely entitled to hold that opinion of not liking me. But I do think too many times in life we want everybody to like us, and that is an impossible dream. And if that's what you're searching for, you're going to be very disappointed. And I think the impact on you personally would be huge. You just cannot strive to do that. I think for me, that bit of, your kind of question about coming to your senses is it's about how I want to live my life, who I want to be, and what my values, motivations, ethics, whatever you want to call them. And I remember people asking me when you have to make some really, really difficult decisions as a chief exec, um, really difficult ones, right? There's not necessarily an easy answer on it. And people saying, how do you live with those decisions? And I get asked that quite a lot. To which my response is always, if I can look myself in the mirror and know that I've made the decisions based on my values, my integrity, and what I believe is the greater good, then I'm okay with that. And you'll notice my language around that is my opinions, my beliefs, because everybody isn't going to agree with what I've decided to do.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? We if we're looking to be liked, or if we're only looking to make decisions that the majority are going to like, then we're going to compromise ourselves. I think there's three components really. It's ourselves, our values, our ethics, whatever that may be. It's the role, it's the purpose of the role. In this instance, you're talking about chief exec, and that's got some specific roles, but also for the greater good, the organization, the business, whatever. And there's three lenses. And I think that often, if we're on the receiving end of a decision, we make it personal first and foremost, which I think I spend a lot of time as a coach saying to somebody, well, what if that wasn't personal? And the transformation in people just spotting that is quite significant. But I think also it's the recognition that somebody's having to make a choice or a decision based on what's right for the organization, and they maybe would never want to make that choice in any other way, but actually the role that they're in has to be organizational driven, so therefore they're needing to make that decision through that lens. And I think that gets forgotten very often as well, because I think we personalize things and go, well, Nat has decided that, rather than it being the chief exec has decided that based on the needs for the organization, led through the lens of where Nat is at the moment.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right on that. There's something about taking an ownership for whatever position you're in, but also people understanding it is a position, it is a work decision. It might be very different to what I would do in my personal life. It might be different to my political views. It could be a whole host of reasons it could be very different, but you're making a decision based on a number of things. And I think the other thing for me is people don't know all of the facts. I mean, how often do we see that? Social media, conversations, so many times people will say, well, this is because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, I worked a lot of time in the NHS. There are so many people that have a view on it that have never worked in it. And actually, they don't know the facts at all. They don't know the reality. They don't know the complexity. But we do that all the time, don't we? That thing of our brain immediately making an assumption of that and that equals this. And she's done this because, or they've done this because, that whole othering is just too easy to do. And I don't know why we all seem to think we're experts on everything these days.
Because we've got these little black mirror things in our hands that we forget that It's being orchestrated. Whatever we're seeing is we're in these little echo chambers based on our viewpoints. All the algorithms are adjusting it where that's concerned, and so therefore we see a snapshot of a piece of information, and as you say, take that bit and make an assumption and talk about it as if A, we're the expert, and B, that information is fact. I know I've been guilty of it for times, and having to stop myself and recognize, actually, do you know what? I don't know. I haven't got the background information. I haven't got the complexities with it. And I think that's the same on a macro perspective as well as a micro perspective for ourselves. Even when I hear people talking about somebody else's relationship, oh, he or she shouldn't be with them. And it's like, you're not in that relationship. So how do you know what's going on around that? What I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about that moment of clarity, that laser-like clarity that you had of realizing that was her opinion and she doesn't like you. What did that lead you to in relation to navigating what was going on at that time as chief exec, and then also then leaving to start your own business?
Yeah. Well, it gave me more confidence, which sounds strange, doesn't it? But often I do believe it's moments of adversity that you really step up and learn about yourself. So I, I think it's easier to lead in, well, shall I call them good times, easy times, whatever. I'll talk to people. If you go into a business as a chief exec and it's performing well, it's easier. If you go into a business that isn't, then it's really hard to be a leader. Uh, it's much harder to stick to your values. It's much harder um, to navigate. And this is my own experience, of course. Again, people will have others. But I think having a real conviction about what you're doing and how you show up is really hard in organizations that need turned around and businesses. And I've been there. So I do speak from experience in terms of actually doing that. But it gave me more confidence. It made me also really think about what's important to me in terms of my broader life. So as well as it kind of, if you like, on that micro level of, yeah, wait a minute, why am I worrying about, why is this giving me sleepless nights? Let's get some perspective on it, which is ultimately what I did, didn't it? By going, she doesn't like me. This is a smear campaign. Fine. That's it. And I'm not going to try and control it. I'm not going to try and manage it. I'm not going to change her mind. Whatever all the things are that we think we can do, I accepted the limitations around it, which is so important. And then actually what that did was created a bit of space for me to think, what do I really want from life? I mean, I was 42 at the time. 42, yeah, 42, 43. Anyway, what's a year or two once you get to our age? Um, But I think as well, it also gave me that thought of, yeah, what do I actually want from my broader life? Where am I going? What does Natalie want? Um, and it led me to really, I say this quite proudly, be a bit selfish. I actually don't believe there's anything wrong with being selfish, and I would recognise I had spent 20 odd years doing what I thought was the right thing for everybody else. And it was actually, what do I want? And a bit of, you give all of this, you give your pound of flesh, you work very, very long hours in those jobs. I mean, I know people talk about hours, but you do. You're never off. You're 7 days a week. And you're easily putting in 14-hour days. And I just had a moment of, I stepped back again from it on a real macro level and just thought, I'm not really sure this is what I want to keep putting myself through, because there'll be another. There will at some point be someone else, even if it's not an HR process. But that kind of thing is going to keep happening. And maybe it's just not how I want to spend the last 20 years of my career. And I do think it just gave me the confidence. I'd wanted to set my own business for a long time. I'd talked about it for a long time, but never really done it, and probably never really had the courage thinking, oh, but all those fears people have of, but I'll be leaving secure employment. What if it doesn't work? What if, what if, what if? And I think I kind of just thought, what the hell? I'm going to do what I want to do. So I did. and set up my
How
own
long does
business.
it take to get to that point? Because I think all of the fears that you've listed. In fact, I had a conversation with a client last week about exactly this. She's in employment and she's talking about wanting to move to something else, but will be self-employed. And we were talking about that it's a different way of thinking. You've really got to recognize that there's a different way of thinking in relation to that perceived security that employment gives you versus the perceived insecurity of not being employed. What was it for you that enabled you to do that shift, and how long a time period was it before you went, that's it, I'm doing it?
Uh, Well, I'd probably say to you, it wasn't that long.
Okay.
Um, it was about 3 to 6 months in total, which I don't think is that long really to walk away from a career like that. But it was also very decisive. Once I had kind of mulled it over for a few months, when I then decided, I decided, which is that kind of when he started talking about how I'm very direct and forthright, I'm very decisive. Once that's it, it's like, no, that's it, and now I'm going to make it happen, and I'm going to do it. That's me. I'm naturally very action orientated. I'm naturally very driven. So once I decide something, that's me. I'm going that way. But I think I probably mulled it over for about 3 to 6 months, kind of. People like to journal and do other things, don't they? My way of journaling is when I'm out running or when I'm
Right.
out walking. Um, I've just said I'm very action orientated, so I like running. But that's when I tend to have a lot of clarity of thought as well. So I started, building on that. Wasn't bothered about I'd moved on to not bothered about this, not bothered about that. That process will carry on. What will be, will be. But I think started just thinking about the seeds of, well, what could be and where do I want to be? And, there's also something about depending what your age is as well. So I recognize now, I mean, I'm 50. I recognize now my focus is on this part of my career as I move up towards retirement rather than, so kind of looking ahead to the end. Whereas at the start of your career, it's all about where are you going? And now I'm like,
Mm.
where am I going to end? And it was that other perspective of, I kind of shared that of what do I really want? Where am I going? But suddenly thinking, I've maybe got about 20 years left of working, which sounds a long time. When you get to 50, you realise there's not as
How
much time
quick.
left as you thought.
And also how quick those 20 years go. I remember when I turned 40, one of my clients said to me, she's older than I am, and she said, just enjoy the next 10 years because they will go faster than you realize. And that was 12 years ago. And it seems like it was about 3 years ago. So I totally get that. And I think that it's that different, isn't it? That the looking to a different point. So there's a different energy around it. And I think that that's often what happens with people that have been in whatever career for a period of time, is that actually they reach a point of going, do you know what? If this is how things are going to be for the next 20 years, do I really want to stay here? And I think to your point of, I think there's a big difference between being selfish and self centered. And I think that people have a misunderstanding of selfish. When they talk about I can't be selfish, they're actually talking about being self centered. Because if, to me, how I hear you describe the shift from being chief exec to running your own business is that what do I really want? I'm pretty sure that that wasn't to the exclusion of the rest of your family, because my guess is there was, if I'm working 14 hours plus in this particular job, then I'm probably not, and on 24/7, I'm probably not spending the quality of time that I really want to spend with my family. So I think that selfishness is not the same as self-centeredness. And I think that is where I don't think, and I do think it's especially as women, but I don't think it's exclusive to women. We are less good at saying, what do I want? I
Yeah,
wondered if you've got some thoughts around that.
yeah, I would agree with you. I think the word selfish it provokes a lot of emotion in people. So unpicking a bit of it is important for me, because why wouldn't you be guided by your own beliefs, needs, wants? I mean, it's about self, isn't it? What's wrong with that? So I think it's stepping out. and removing the emotions that are around the word selfish, and because it gets used in a very negative way, doesn't it? They're
Mm,
selfish. That's a selfish thing to do. It's always got a negative connotation. Whereas, yeah, I think what I'm describing is, for me, it was a different mindset of, well, I am going to be selfish. I'm going to do something that's for me. And as you rightly say, is for my broader family. And, my sons were still reasonably young, still both at home, one still at primary, one at secondary. Again, that's going to be gone before I know it. But also my partner, my husband, he's not seeing me either. And also the impact on me from a mental health and emotional point of view. I just see people all the time now that look absolutely exhausted, and if I'm honest,
mm,
unwell. The
yeah.
pressures on people now. I mean, I don't know about you, Jules, but I find it ridiculous now that it seems to be quite normal that people think it's okay to ask you to meet at 8 in the morning or 6 at night. When did the working day suddenly become 10 hours? And almost that you're slacking if you say, I start at 9 o'clock. That's a late
It's
start.
weekends from my perspective that I get asked a lot. You didn't reply. Well, yeah, because it was a weekend and I was doing stuff for me. That's where I find interesting. And I think unfortunately that's where technology. I think that the fluid way of working that the pandemic provided was what we hadn't ever experienced before, of being able to be online, being able to have the technology to communicate at different times, which is phenomenal. And that doesn't mean that everyone's going to commute. I mean, I don't know about yourself, but because I know that you're more business to business working, whereas I'm business to business and personal as well. But I've got messages coming in on social media from clients. I've got them coming in from WhatsApp and Signal and texting and trying. And obviously, the moment I can see, and if I accidentally open it, the person knows I've opened it. So therefore, then there becomes an expectation that I'm going to reply then and there. And I think that that's what we all could do with recognizing for ourselves that just because I've messaged somebody doesn't mean to say that they can or should reply immediately. If it's a life threatening situation, please pick up the phone. But I think that the toll, my personal view is the toll that that's taking on people's capacity and energy to deal with what's going on. I mean, you were talking about as a chief exec working 14 plus hours a day. But I think that people aren't now recognizing, because they keep grabbing these things or they've got the computer on all the time, is then they're not recognizing that constant pinging of things, the impact that that has on us from a physiological, emotional, mental, and also energetic perspective. And I think I realize I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but that one of the conversations I have so frequently with all levels of people is around setting those boundaries and letting people know I will reply, but these are the time frames. And if it is urgent, please pick up the phone. And I think that we need to actually start taking that selfish attitude in a healthy way for ourselves so that we can put those boundaries there and start to respect, rather than those demands being, can you meet at 8 o'clock? Can you meet at 6 o'clock? Can you reply to this on a Sunday at 7 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? I think for me, I completely agree with you about setting boundaries, and I think we all should, or setting expectations if people find that. Sometimes people find that an easier word to use, don't they? But I think for me, there's a difference between being responsive and being reactive. So clearly, having a business, we need to be responsive. That's one of the things that people look for. HR, if something, is going wrong in your business or you've got an issue, you want somebody to help you. You want someone that's responsive. But I do think we've mixed that up, and now we think that means reacting to everything
Mm,
all of the time, and that has got blurred. So I would agree with you. For me, I've really trained myself to not constantly go into your emails and just react to what's in front of you in that inbox, but have proper time carved out for when you're going to respond to emails and when you're not. And of course, Jules, there's times where you can't quite stick to that. But by and large, I think, as you say, just setting some boundaries, being clear with clients about we will respond within 24 hours just helps to set expectations because everything is in the moment because everyone's so
Mm,
obsessed with likes and replies rather than the quality of the actual response and what we're doing. But we have
mm,
got to learn to be off sometimes. We really have. I mean, we were catching up on our walks and things that we've done recently. That for me is one of the best holidays I had because I didn't watch TV, I didn't actually listen to music, which is very unlike me. I didn't read a book. I normally love all of those things, nothing wrong with them. I was just in a moment. I just walked every day. That was it, right?
mm.
Sometimes talked to the friends I was with, sometimes didn't. Just looked around me. I do think we've lost that recognition of what rest really is, which is just nothing. Our body not being expected to do anything really, and we're not very good at that, are we?
We're really not. And, it was one of the things that struck me with my walk as well in Nepal is that I had nothing to do than put one foot in front of the other and make sure the body was fueled. Really and truly, there was nothing else that was needed. And I think that the way in which we live currently, there's so many demands, and I think there's this whole FOMO thing about, yeah, but if I'm doing nothing, I'm missing out. I think there's this perception of, but I'm only of value if I'm doing something. I have to be productive, and that nothingness is wrong, nothingness is lazy. And actually, the quality of, and I don't know if it's the same for yourself, but the quality of connection to myself that I experienced by doing the trek in Nepal was something I haven't experienced for a long period of time because there wasn't the noise internally. And anytime the noise tried to kick in, it's like, well, you can't do anything about any of that right now. You've got no phone signal. You've got no web access. All you need to do is make sure you walk up there. That's it. Then you've got that route. And I think that I'm wondering, and I was thinking about this when you were talking about the demands of the high level role that you had. And there are demands, especially working in HR and especially running your own business, and you employ people as well. How do you, and I know one of the answers is running, but how do you manage your energy in relation to all of that?
That makes it very fortunate. So I can what do I mean by that? So I can digest information very, very quickly and hone in on the pertinent point, that just the way my brain works. Um, so that's pretty good when I've got different plates spinning. However, there are still times I do run my own business. It is a roller coaster. That is true. I know people say that all the time, but it is true. It's a roller coaster. It's ups and downs. It can happen hour to hour, week to week, and it's fairly relentless. And you are responsible for your business. You're responsible for people that work with you to some extent. I mean, but ultimately, the business has to succeed to pay their mortgages and everything else that comes with it. And so I think it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier with that. It's clarity for me, and it's always knowing. So, what's your purpose, and why are you doing this? Because again, when the chips are down, or you are having one of those, frankly, slightly crappy days where the contract you thought was going to come in hasn't come in, or somebody's complaining, somebody's not happy, because that is the realities of business, or you're worried about cash flow. The bit that's gonna, as I say, get you out of bed each morning and dust yourself down is why are you here?
Mm,
And so it goes back to why did I set up the business? Well, because I wanted to genuinely offer people a really good quality service that was not ripping them off, quite frankly. So helping people and giving them that that HR advice or that learning development space that would really enable them to be better as a business. And so it's that sense of who we are as a business and who I am. It kind of comes back to the same thing each time for me. What's the purpose? What's the intention behind it? So that when the times are difficult, that's what reminds you. And then the other bit is I'm also very good at going, then that's their opinion. So that let's let that one go. We're not for them and they're not for us. Because I do think we get very hooked up in we're being rejected by people or very upset when somebody leaves a terrible review. And it goes back to not everybody's going to like it. I mean, it's the same. The other example I'll give is if you go to a restaurant, okay? Now, not everybody likes the same restaurants. So
Mm,
I absolutely hate it when people ask me to recommend a restaurant because I
me
think,
too.
well, this is the restaurant I like. Because how many times have you had people go, I went, I didn't think very much of it. And it and I used to get a bit annoyed or I'd think, well, I can't believe they've told me that or I wish I hadn't recommended it. Whereas now I think, okay, you've asked me a recommendation, but this is my recommendation and I like it because. And if you don't like it, fine, then don't go again. Just, there's something for me about when do we just, I kind of physically in my head, you might notice I'm quite animated. So I kind of do a physical of, right, that's that one gone then. Sails off in the distance, chapter
Mm.
closed, end of. Because otherwise, you just drive yourself mad going over and over things, trying to work out why they've said that, why that happened, what else could I have done? And people, I think, just get themselves into this constant rut of wanting everybody to like them, everybody to buy from them, to be the company of choice. And it's just an impossible dream.
And to look at it through the other lens and to echo why it is the impossible dream is if I was the right coach for everybody, if you were the right HR company, OD training company for everybody, we wouldn't be able to facilitate that. So, so that there is the recognition of that as well, and I think that I love the point of well, we're not for them and they're not for us. I think that we forget that. I often will talk to people if they're going in for interviews and, oh, I'm so scared about an interview. It's like, well, you do realize you're interviewing them. It is a two-way. It's not a one-way street. And the shock with people recognizing that. And I think that's the same thing in business. And it took me far too many years to remind myself or truly see that for myself, that I am not the right coach for everybody. And equally, they are not the right coachee for me. And there's nothing wrong with either people involved in that. That's just the same as, well, not every restaurant is for me, and it's not for everybody else. And it's about finding the right things and that alignment. There's something that's really striking me that I'd love to talk about before we wrap up, which is you refer to it as self-assuredness. You have a wonderful knowing of who you are. Did that come about because of the attack, quote unquote, that was going on when you were chief exec, or did you have a true strong knowing of who you were before that? And either way, how did you get to that point? Because I think that that's something that many people don't know. Not who you are, but who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always had a strong sense of who I am, whether we call it a kind of moral compass or a purpose, but I would say I've had that quite inherent in me. I would say really guided quite a lot by parents. It's often that, isn't it? What happens in your life, nature, nurture. But I think there's a lot of certainly being encouraged as a child to be whoever you want to be, whilst also being taught about morals really, and I suppose being a good citizen. Sounds a bit
Mm,
cheesy, doesn't it? But there is something for me about that, being part of your community, being part of society, and how do you show up. So I could have talked about other times. I've often been referred to as courageous, so I've had that in a lot of feedback by people. And what people mean by that is I will speak up and I will give a different view, or if I think something isn't right. And of course, that's my right. It's not necessarily, there isn't a universal right. But if I don't think something feels right to me or is right, I won't be afraid to offer a different view. And I've done that throughout my career, um, and at a great personal risk. Um, and
mm,
and I think some of that is inherent in you. I think it's just sharpened it for me, by events that have then happened and probably crystallized in it. And I do think, I've had really good mentors, I've had really good coaches, and not just what I would call the formal ones through work, um, but the informal ones around me. And, you know, people often talk about who they want to be like, and I always say, absolutely, take bits from different people, as in elements of them that you like and that, you know, align with you, but don't try and be somebody you're not. So,
Mm.
does that make sense? There'll be things that I
Yeah,
think, well,
definitely.
I see that in that person and I admire them or I respect them for it, but I won't try and be a carbon copy of someone else. And I suppose the slightly, well, I don't think it's controversial, because I don't think it's ageist. I think it's the reality. I think as you go through life and you test out who you are and what's important to you, the more experiences you have, the more for me, it kind of really anchored me in who I was. It's that adversity that I think strengthens your sense of purpose.
I think that's such a true thing, and I think that the more that I think very quickly people try to pigeonhole themselves. I'm this kind of person, and without realizing it, even more so in this day and age, we're not seeing the dictated identities from the external world. We can pinpoint it as social media, we can pinpoint it as culture, society, whatever. And I think that we all could do with just testing, dare I use the word boundaries again, but testing those boundaries of perception for ourselves. Is that really who I am? When I first met you and listened to how forthright you were and would challenge things, I absolutely did what you just described. And I was like, ooh, what would it be like to be more Nat, quote unquote, or hashtag, we could start a new trend, be more Nat. But it's not because I was looking to be you. It was like, well, what would it be like if I was more vocal, if I challenged things, if I spoke out in that way? What would that be like? What could I learn? And that didn't mean that I automatically got it right or did it in a way that was eloquent or and probably stumbled over my words and made an idiot of myself at times. But to me, it's about looking at those informal mentors, and it might not even be people that are personally in our lives. It might be people at a much greater distance that we read about or listen about or watch and go, I'm gonna try that on for size and see what that's like. And I think my personal view is the benefit of that is it could ignite something within you that you didn't know was there. So I don't think it's not, I'm trying to copy you, but it's like, well, if I try it on for size, I can see whether it's there, see whether it comes out in my flavor. And if it's totally at odds, then actually maybe I need to put that down and recognize that that's not part of who and how I am at this point. I love this conversation. I think it's you. I knew it would be a great conversation with you because of your wholehearted honestness and courageousness of speaking out about your experiences and your viewpoints on things. Is there any other advice or guidance that you could offer out to anyone listening to this about how they might navigate the chaos of life so that they can have that lightning clarity that you were talking about at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think a really simple um, technique which might help people if they're feeling a bit not quite sure where I am, what's my purpose, is just doing that really simple lifeline.
Okay.
So looking ahead about what this is, and it's a lifeline, not just a work or career, but what might be coming up between now and whether it's retirement or further on in life. But it's the kind of Stephen Covey, isn't it? Start with the end in mind. Um, not to be depressing, but almost it's so what do I want this life to have meant to me and work backwards. So, if people have got children, start thinking about so when are going to be big life moments for them? It might be going to school, it might be leaving school, leaving education. But what might it be for me as an individual, retiring, or it might be I've only got, I often hear people when I'm talking to them about, well, I've only maybe got one more big job in me or two more
Mm,
big jobs in me, or I'm younger, I want to get to here by the age of 35. But just doing a really simple timeline of some big chunky dates in your life and things that are happening and drawing it, I think gives you a real sense of, do you know what? We've This is it. We have got a finite period of time here. What do I want to do with it? How do I want to show up? So I often get people to do that to start the conversation going. And then I think the very simple technique when we feel a bit overwhelmed or when things are a bit tough in life. So the example I gave about where do you find some clarity is just doing that good old what can I control and what can I influence. And I know it's a model that's been around for decades, but as I often say to people, there's a reason for that. The ones that have been around for a long time, it's because they work, people. And the models are not meant to be complicated, and they're not meant to take me 2 weeks of studying to understand them. But the good kind of what can I control? What can I influence? What do I accept? Is I've go to that quite a lot, and I might just scribble in my book and think, scribble it down, and immediately I just feel a bit better because suddenly feel I'm a little bit more in control of it. I know what I can do and I know what I have to let go, whether it's other people's behavior, other actions, things that are happening in the world. So, yeah, those would probably be my two go tos.
I love both of those. And I think the word that it strikes me, it's a word that you used earlier actually, was that both of them give perspective. So it's that stepping back, seeing that timeline. As many people say, you've got two dates on your gravestone, neither of which you know about. You don't know about the one you were born, and you probably won't know about the one that you died. But the bit that's important is that dash line, and that's that timeline. Extend it out. Look at those key points. Work toward them, or just have an awareness of them and make some decisions for yourself, and then recognize within that what you can control, what you can influence, and accept the rest, and then make moves forward from there. I love all of that, Nat, because it's actionable. It's not, as you say, it's not something you've got to go and study and get qualified in before you can apply it to your life. It's there at your fingertips. Grab a pen and paper, and it's there. It can be done. Final thing I will ask, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you would like to add into the conversation?
I think I'd just add and remember to have fun along the way, because that can sound quite serious, our conversation, though I know we're smiling and laughing. But yeah, don't forget to have fun. Life's great. Embrace it.
I love that, and I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Nat. We'll put all your details in the show notes, and I look forward to speaking to you all again on another episode of Coming to Your Senses.